So in this lesson, I want to show you how to use the emission of basically temperature by itself to push smoke off of objects. And you can use this for all sorts of shockwave effects and any kind of a scenario where you need a dramatic push of smoke or fire. But as always, you can use any 3D model that you would like for this. We're gonna jump right into it by creating a Phoenix grid as always. And I know that the shockwave is gonna be pushed to the left, so I'm gonna make the grid accordingly. We can go under grid and set the Z as jammed minus. We can leave the resolution pretty low for now. You can set the conservation method to PCG symmetric, which is the highest quality one really for a smoke effect like this. And then the quality, you can do something higher, so maybe 32 for now. And steps per frame, for now, let's do 2. The next steps are always gonna be the same, so we're gonna enable the GPU preview. Next, let's make a fire source. And let's basically select the entire bus body as an emission for the smoke, because we really just kind of want the smoke to be coming out of the whole bus. And we really only want a little bit of the smoke, not too much. So I'm gonna do 0.1 meters for the outgoing velocity. So let's set the temperature to 300 because I don't really want it to be rising up or falling down. It's just supposed to be dust. So really it's just gonna linger around and be pushed by the temperature to the side. And before we move forward, let's run the simulation and make sure that this is working. And it's working beautifully. At frame 3, we get the bus covered with this smoke. So we can go under the rendering tab again and just give it that dust color. So under volumetric options, smoke color, constant color, and you can just play with this until you give it that sort of a dusty color for the smoke, so maybe something like this for now. So now we need to push the dust sort of in a dramatic way to the left, and there are different ways you can do it. You could do a plane force, you could do a wind, but I found that actually using a burst of temperature gets me the coolest results, and it's actually the most realistic because in reality it would be a heat wave, a shock wave from a nuclear bomb would have a lot of heat with it, and it affects the way the smoke moves and everything. So basically we're gonna make just a regular box on the side here, and let's do the whole poly process again. So make it an editable poly, select this polygon and set it to ID 10, and then let's create another source and select the box as our source. For the outgoing velocity, I actually want to animate that for just one frame. So on frame 8, let's say I'm going to set auto key and set the outgoing velocity to 3000 meters, so something really high. And then on frame 7, it should be 0, and on frame 9, it should be 0 as well. So only for that one frame, it's 3000. And let's set the temperature to 1000 for now. We can play with that later. So let's run the simulation and see if this is working the way we want. And it's not working because I forgot to turn off smoke for the box. So just so you guys can see, I'm completely transparent with you. I mess up all the time. So let me run this again. So I'm running the sim and it's working beautifully. There are a few things we're gonna improve. So number one, because of the rendering settings I'm using, I can actually see the temperature here is rendered as fire. So we're gonna turn off fire rendering completely. However, it is pushing the smoke off the bus just like we wanted, so that's perfect. So first, let's go under the volumetric rendering settings. And for the fire, we're just gonna say disabled. Next thing I wanna do, I feel like it's a little too strong. So let's go back into the animation here for the box, set auto key again, maybe set it to just 1000 meters. I feel like 3000 is way too brutal. Then before we forget, let's click on this box and go to object properties, make it not renderable, and go to Phoenix FD properties and make it not a solid object, just so that it's not interacting with anything in any way. The next thing I would change is I feel like the smoke is being emitted from the bus for too long. So let's go back into the bus emitter here and maybe set this to just from frame 5 to frame 10. because we really just want a burst of dust. We don't want this to be covered in smoke like this. And then I feel like I really need to raise the steps per frame as well, because it's just so fast that Phoenix is freaking out and it doesn't really know what's happening. So we need to give it more steps per frame to work with. So I'm gonna raise this to 4, just like I did in my example. And I feel like we need to raise the resolution more as well. So I'm gonna stop the sim, it's paused right now, and maybe make this 0.07 meters, 4 million total cells. And let's run the sim and see if we get something better. All right, so with these changes, I feel like we're getting something much more subtle. I think maybe now the force is actually too low. I really like the detail and the way it's moving here, but then it sort of slows down too much. So I would maybe go back into the box and set the outgoing velocity maybe to 2000 meters and see if we get something a bit more dramatic. And I also feel like it would help for the push to last longer than just 1 frame. So I'm gonna move the 0 frame further and extend the 2000 meter frame, and you can just hold shift and drag and it'll copy the keyframe. So maybe from frame 8, 9 and 10. So for 3 frames, it's gonna be pushed with that 3000 meter outgoing velocity, and that should get us to what we need as far as the shockwave effect. All right, so I'm happy with the way this looks. I think the initial burst is pretty cool. You can see that it's sort of pushed off the bus in a pretty cool way. And then it's sort of up to you as to what happens after that. You can add some plane force to keep pushing the dust off as if there's wind. Or after the shockwave happens, it just sort of lingers in the air like it does for me here. Now, let's just right click on this box, go to Object Properties and make it Display as Box so it's not in our way. And we can take a better look at what we have from all angles. So I think that's a pretty cool effect. And we're going to do something very similar for the tank firing. Now, as always, you can go back into the volumetric settings under rendering and play with the smoke opacity to get some different looks. It looks pretty good with just pretty low opacity. I think this would be a more realistic look. You know, in the real life, you wouldn't really get that much dust. Or you can do something really thick for just some super heavy sort of nuclear shockwave look. And before I go, you know, for the setup, I basically just did like a road under the bus. And then I'm using the same V-Ray Sun rendering setup that I did for the shockwave that I showed you a lesson ago. So this ended up being my final result for that. So I hope that you guys found this temperature push technique helpful, and I'll see you in the next lesson.